Welcome to the Herpcore History podcast, presented to you by Little Shop of Horrors. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms for any of your feeder needs. All right, let's go ahead and get into this episode. I'm joined by Mr. Ron Tremper. He was gracious enough to agree to do a podcast with me. How's it going, Mr. Tremper?
Doing great. Glad to be here. It's going to
Excellent.
be a good hour. I mean, it'll be enjoyable.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm glad to have you here. So where'd you grow up at?
Well, I was born and raised in Fresno, California, and Fresno's right at the base of the Sierra foothills. Always had a fascination for reptiles and outdoor things and bugs and stuff since I was very little. And yeah, was in Fresno for 42 years and had a great private collection and went on to be the Chaffee Zoo's first herpetologist and also a lot of good memories. Still a lot of good connections there in Fresno.
Yes, sir. And what was your first experience with reptiles? What got you into them?
Oh boy, well I have to kind of contribute it to my grandfather. He was always telling me stories about this garter snake that lived at his back door and ate his special tree frog in the ranch in the Central Valley. And when he was younger, he used to collect Pacific pond turtles for the food market in San Francisco. A lot of people had moved from the East Coast and were used to diamondback terrapins were big in the uh, late 1800s for consumption, and so he did some of that. So it's just planted a lot of seeds, and I just had a huge fascination for reptiles right from the get-go, very young age.
Very cool. So were you doing a lot of field herping? Did you ever do any field herping with, I guess field collecting at that point with what he was doing? Or is that something you started on your own?
No, it was my grandfather passed when I was 12 or 13, so never did anything more than some fishing trips with my father and his dad. And but I always wanted to get out and was always chasing lizards. And there were some empty lots in the home development area in Fresno there where we were, and had a few side blotch lizards and western fence swifts there, and what they call blue bellies. And it was just forever wanting to find a snake. When I was like 9, 10 years old, and that kind of thing. What's really fun is when I had all this interest, had read every reptile book there was, especially stuff on turtles and tortoises. By the time I was 11 or 12 years old, in junior high, which they call middle school these days, seventh grade, uh, I started the Sierra Junior High Reptile Club. And
Oh, very cool.
there was a biology teacher there and sponsored it and was really took me under his wing, always let me read his reptile books he had in the classroom on his shelf and during school hours even. And so one time at one of the meetings he said he had read something, and I think he had read something by Klauber um, about night driving, the words night driving. And so got my dad's car and his our sponsor's car and 6 or 7 members went up in this little side paved road above Fresno. We were over on the Madera County side at that time, and nobody knew how to conduct night driving. I mean, everybody had flashlights. most kids were all sitting on the hoods of these two cars. The two cars were only about 20 feet apart. And it was getting dark a little bit. Uh, and we're creeping along at walking speed, literally walking speed. No one knew what the world was going on with how it is now with night driving. And so we, there was a foothill alligator lizard on the road, and that was really exciting. And then pretty soon it was dark, and we yelled snake, and they threw on the brakes. A couple of kids all slid off the front, fenders of the Ford Galaxy on almost onto a Northern Pacific Rattler. It was a young one, and this was amazing. And no one had a snake hook then or anything. They just kind of, I don't know, they took pictures with their brownie snap cameras or something. And any rate, it was, yeah, I mean, we're talking, 1963 here. And so by the end of the evening, we found a young cow king and a long-nosed snake to boot. And from then on, I was hooked on night driving. That was it, man. I was just begging my father all the time to take me up and different places and cruise the roads and that kind of thing. So, but I started collecting turtles and tortoises when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I thought it'd be really cool to have five different species. I'd gotten a nice three-toed box turtle at a little trinket stand on Fisherman's Wharf up in San Francisco, and then the local pet shop had like painted turtles or red ears, and I just thought, man, this would be cool. I was kind of into coin collecting a little bit too, and I like collecting things. So anyway, it just really took off, and I didn't keep housing any snakes or anything until I was about 4 or 5 years later, and my folks helped me build a turtle pond in the back, and they were so supportive my whole life. And then we needed the tortoise shed, and where I had a young Galapagos tortoise, which was my dream animal, and then eventually a little air conditioned snake barn where I focused on the Lamprepeltis. I'll tell you about the Galapagos. Every Christmas, all I asked for was a Galapagos tortoise and reptile books. And of course, there was like one reptile book every 4 or 5 years that would come out back then instead of one a week now. And but at any rate, I had found out there was this guy down in the LA area, and believe it or not, he was selling Galapagos tortoises for $25 an inch. And
What a
yeah,
deal.
yeah, exactly. And back then I had saved up, $100, which is astronomical amount in 1963 for a young kid. And so I wrote him a letter. That's all you could do. And he never responded. Well, on my 16th birthday, we had a cabin an hour up in the Sierras at 5,000 foot elevation near Shaver Lake. And we were up there for my birthday weekend. And my folks said, "Hey, could you get this such out of your room? I left some stuff up there." And then everybody was following me upstairs to my room, and there in a cardboard box with a spotlight over it was a little 6 inch Galapagos tortoise. And I'll never forget it. It was so incredibly exciting.
Yes,
And
sir.
so they had called this guy down there and said, "Hey, how come you never answer my son?" He said, "Well, he wanted a 4 inch Galab, and the smallest I had was 6 inch." So they had paid the difference, and I still have the shipping tag. It was shipped up in a little like wire cage, like you'd put a hamster in, with some straw on the bottom, on the railroad. it was called Rail Express, REA, Rail Express, something another, and from LA to Fresno in a freight car. And any rate, yeah, a lot of great stuff. And so I just kept, you know, studying and learning and stuff. And back then, it was crazy because at 12 years of age, I was already 6'2", and that's how I remain to this day. But all my friends were 45 to 70 years old in the herp field because
Yes.
there just wasn't anybody around. Here I am, you know, 12 years old, and knew all the turtles and tortoise names in the world by genus and species, and I was just walking encyclopedia with a lot of this stuff. And my folks would drive me up to Steinhardt Aquarium or get around with these other herpetologists at the time and network and get a tour and down to San Diego Zoo. I met Chuck Shaw then at that time and got a tour of the San Diego Zoo Reptile House. And it just kept growing, and started making some friends and acquaintances around Fresno. And I went off to the Peace Corps in Cameroon doing freshwater fish culture. And when I got back from there in '74, I had a little part-time job evenings at a pet store in a mall nearby, and in walked Robert Hansen. He had heard about me, and someone told him I worked down at this pet shop in the evenings, and so that's how I met Bob, and we've been friends for 51 years and did a lot of adventures. So when I met Bob, he had like two or three reptile books and a 6-foot boa and a lot of interest, and we just hit it off. And I'm a few years older, and I was always sort of, coming up. Hey, I think I can get permits since I, doing this work in the summers at the zoo. I think I can get us permits to Mexico, and you heard that story in the last episode. So, any rate, it just kept flourishing, and the director of the Chaffee Zoo, which is named after the former director that passed away, and my dear friend. Um, he really believed in me, and one day that little Galapagos got a runny nose, and well, Dr. Chaffee was not only zoo director at that time, but had been our veterinarian. And so, anyway, my mom hauls me down there. He had gotten this call through his secretary, and he said he couldn't believe it. Somebody said they had a Galapagos tortoise that needed to be looked at. And, and sure enough, it was a Galapagos tortoise, and he was stunned. And he said, one day we're going to be build the zoo's reptile house. Maybe you can be the zoo's first herpetologist. And I said, that's my dream. Yeah, that was in like 1968 or 9. And yeah, 8, 9 years later, I had designed the whole reptile house with these computerized environmental chambers, and was the zoo's first herpetologist. So yeah,
Wow.
a lot of cool stuff.
Yes, sir. Well, how cool is that? I mean, you shot right into the major leagues of cool stuff, I mean, just in general, right? And then to have a supportive family, that's beautiful. That helps you move along, and very very cool. Well,
Yeah,
excellent.
my
And
parents were just so supportive. They had two sons. One wanted to be a missionary, and one wanted to be a zoo, curator, reptiles, herpetologist guy. And it's like, how in the world are they ever going to make it? There's like one zoo curatorship available every 10 years in America, and how do you make a living, being a missionary and depending on donations from the church and so forth. So but they were just champions. Oh my gosh, they just did everything all the way through, supported it, and lots of success came from it.
That's so cool. I love to hear that. I love to hear that. And so going into that position, working for the zoo, what was that? What was that like? I mean, especially at such a young age, and back then, what was the
Yeah,
husbandry like?
yeah. The I actually got the zoo herpetologist position when I was just turning 20. I was 27, and so I was the youngest curator in the nation, and uh, uh, Jim Bacon at the San Diego Zoo and a couple others, Harvey Fisher at the LA Zoo, uh, called me Kid Fresno, and it was a great one. But yeah, I loved that. But yeah, I had kept up with things a lot, and while I was back from Cameroon, immediately the zoo director had me in there as his assistant, and so I kind of ran the zoo or watched over it when he'd go to Africa on trips with the Zoological Society, and started planning the reptile house in 1975. And the architect would come every week, and they had it all mapped out. They had a lot of the funding already, and so I was able to say, hey, look, here's all the mistakes that the other reptile houses in California and elsewhere have made. We need a building with no windows to the outside, shining in and, dictating the light cycle to the animals on exhibit. We need to have this and that and all these different, a step for the kids to be able to stand on. A lot of features just fundamental for a reptile house to succeed. And I said, reptiles all depend on their environment, and it would be really cool if we had these individual chambers where we could program when the sun would rise and set, and humidity level, and temperature, and the whole deal, day and night drops, so that uh, because the typical reptile house, and still to this day kind of thing, they just heat the whole working area, temperature control it to one temperature. So all this stuff, is pretty much temperate sort of species, and then they can bump it up a little bit with a spotlight or something. But I mean, even at the San Antonio Zoo, you've probably been there. They're inside their reptile house is very small area for the staff, and things are kind of in the hallways and all one temperature. So I came up with this idea, which the zoo director greatly supported. For I called environmental chambers, and my dad had an air conditioning and sheet metal company as his career. And I'd work for him on the summers before I started working at the zoo for summers. And so I knew something about air conditioning units and this and that. And we ended up with these wonderful displays where we could have a green tree python, and right next to it was, giant salamanders from Northern California at 54 degrees. And so with these, and all of them in a nice dimly lit hallway with a, adobe brick walls, which was a material that's kind of famous around Fresno. And anyway, the reptile house opened July 1st, 1979. Betty White was there to cut the ribbon, and uh, my colleagues came, James Bacon and Harvey Fisher, Merritt Kesey from the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum. I had worked there the summer of 70 as an intern, and so it was quite a great moment to see all my ideas. And the reptile house still stands, and we bred several species within the first couple years, first in the world captive breeding, and Catalina rattleus rattlesnake, and one of the New Zealand geckos, Naltina species, and some others, but a lot of things reproduced and did well, and it's still functioning. I was last there, visited in, I think it was mm, 2014, and zoo director was Scott Barton. He used to be a reptile keeper for me, and we had a nice tour, walk through memory lane, and it was neat to go behind the scenes, see my former office and all the stuff still working. So they upgraded, of course, the controls for the environmental chambers quite a bit over those years, and yeah, neat stuff. I still have good feelings about the zoo, but I always wanted to do what I called reptile ranching, and at that time, you know, captive breeding really kind of started in the 70s with Ernie Wagner, some of his corn snake work, and some of the zoos. It was just incidental if something bred. And, to San Antonio Zoo, Joseph Laszlo became a very good friend of mine, and he was fooling around with ducting in cold air to blow on monitors, at certain times of the year. And he really, taught me a lot about ideas, concepts of micro niche habitat controls and, you know, cool downs and light cycles and things like that. So I incorporated all that knowledge into the Fresno Zoo and really did well. And yeah, it's just been great. Yeah, I always had my turtles and tortoises at home. I donated all my snake collection, land propelled, different things from Mexico I collected with Bob Hansen and things I had acquired, Arizona Mountain Kings, California Mountain Kings, and all. I donated all that to the zoo. Didn't want to have any conflict of interest, but yeah, lots of good stuff there. We hatched American alligators, and the I created an artificial kind of rainstorm for our Argentine horn frogs, Ceratophrys ornata, and they bred overnight, and that kind of thing. So that was a
But
nice first.
yes or no? And how interesting. I mean, for you to be having those concepts and then putting them to play and then see them working out. That's crucial, and especially it's interesting because I think that a lot of those ideas are stuff that might be nowadays paraded as kind of newer ways of keeping or new ideas, and to hear you saying, hey, I went in, I saw the problem, this is how we fix it, those microclimates and all that. It's definitely changing the hobby and definitely the way we should be moving, so that's so cool to hear you doing it then.
Yeah, Dr. Chaff was just so supportive, and he was grooming me to be the zoo director at some point, I know. And when I decided to resign on my own volition there in 1983, I know he was disappointed and all, but he had recognized my abilities, and when that happens, you get someone behind you like Dr. Chaffee. He was there to support it all with all the concepts and believed in me so much, and it was all backed up with uh, the funding and the building of the reptile house, and it was cool because my dad really bid low so he could get the job for to put in all the air conditioning and sheet metal in the reptile house. So that was pretty neat to see all the his workers out there installing that, guys I had worked with, around growing up as a kid each summer at my dad's sheet metal and air conditioning shop. So it was a big affair.
Yes,
But
sir.
yeah, neat stuff.
Well, just that underlying support that you always had. That's so cool to see it, kind of help rocket you into your adult life and move you forward. And so that's it's beautiful to hear. Something that I wanted to ask about was early on with your turtle keeping and tortoise keeping. Did you have any early wants to breed anything, and did you, or was it just keeping?
No, no, the breeding thing was like a dream, and I had paired up the three-toed box turtles and found a baby in my turtle yard one day there in Fresno, and that was just a thrill, to get to actually have something reproduce. I was about, it was like 1961 or something. It was
Yes, sir.
crazy, and so any rate, the yeah, I just always was in the captive breeding, and so this whole concept of reptile ranching, um, I wanted to leave the zoo profession when I was right on top, when I had no burnout and that kind of thing, and so I gave them 3 months notice, and I had already built up, a number of leopard geckos, and I had successfully bred the African bullfrog, the burrowing bullfrog, they call it, Pixocephalus adspersus. What I had done is I took the pituitary gland out of some American bullfrogs that captured locally and injected that pituitary into the female pixie and the male, and then hand stripped eggs and sperm in a bowl and bred them. And so it was something I had learned in the Peace Corps with my freshwater fish culture. You're way up there, the highlands of Bemenda, a 6 hour drive from the coast, and on your own, how do you breed the fish for the people and this and that? And so we had been trained in University of Oklahoma at Norman, and one of the things we were trained on was keep your Swiss Army knife, which comes with a little forceps and all that with you, and you could remove the pituitary from uh, any male or female fish and inject it into the female. And it taught us how to hand strip. So one day I got to thinking about, I'd bred the Ceratophrys ornata without hormones, and in May of '81, when I was at the zoo, and now I was on my own at home, I thought, why not? We just need a hormone boost here. If we can use a salmon luteinizing hormone to induce Ceratophrys ornata, the breed that Ernie Wagner had done earlier in May of 81 up at the zoo there in Seattle, why not apply it to the African bullfrog? And it worked nicely. And so, yeah, it's just always been about breeding. So I went off and just started breeding stuff in an old rundown barn house in the edge of Fresno in Clovis, California there, and gradually built it up to where it moved into a rented facility, and over the years started a price list, trips to Europe. What happened was is people would get ripped off. People in Europe had all these species that the U.S. wanted, and vice versa, especially the king snakes and all. And no one trusted each other after people getting ripped off. Send your money and then I'll send the animals. Well, blah, blah. And so I thought, oh, here's an opportunity. And I already had made quite a few contacts via the zoo world in my career there. And I had spoke at Oxford University, a big herp symposium. And so I started making trips. I'd find out what all the private collectors in Germany especially wanted, and I'd see what they had to offer, and then I'd get things from various colubrid breeders in California, uh, and John Ruiz and Gary Sipperly and a few of the pioneers with colubrid breeding down in Southern California. And I'd take those things over, and they just see, oh, here's the three blue tongue skinks, and here's these rhacodactylus, and here's these Carusia, prehensile-tailed skinks, and all, and it was just like, you know, curb service. They'd see the stuff. Back then you could travel in your checked luggage, and I had these things called Tremper tubes, which are just a long plastic tube that you can put fluorescent bulbs in and break them so that they can be disposed of. Then I just got some PVC end caps, and then I took a hot nail and made the air holes, and then the I could line these all up like displaying, jewelry or something on a person's coffee table in their house. You got all these tubes so you could see all these, different Lamprey and cool Puebloan milk snakes and things like that. And they just, shower me with the stuff that had made its way to Germany. So did a lot of trips like that to Netherlands and UK and Italy and Switzerland, and so I still have a lot of contacts there. So I got a lot of cool stuff. I brought in um, almost all the species of Rhacodactylus to the United States through uh, Willie Hinkle there in Germany, famous gecko guy and friend of mine, Wilhelm Hinkle, and got a lot of things started. My friend at the Frankfurt Zoo said, "Hey, you need to take some of these baby bearded dragons because there's none in America and all this." And so I bought some from the Frankfurt Zoo, and he had the export permits and all from Germany. And I remember in Fresno at my little breeding center outlet, it was an old former print shop and actually had an address and was kind of a formal setup. And there was Bob Mayhew from Sandfire and Dragons there, and an infamous guy named Terry Lilly that from the coast, and uh, another guy from the Northern California Herp Society, I believe it was Mike Bumgardner. And I opened up this box, and they got their baby bearded dragons, and of course Bob Mayhew went off and made himself quite a name. I kept some and did breed them, but really did well, and with his work with Alan Rapace and all down there with the dragons, and made a whole career of it.
And so going over to Europe early on, there's like three kind of branches here in that little sentence that you hit us with that I want to follow. And so I don't know where it leads us, but I hope we can hit them all. Where early on, well, first, I don't think people understand the legwork that the founders of modern herpetoculture put in to make these things possible, right? The idea of packing up these animals, traveling to Europe, selling them that way, making those connections to fund what you wanted to do here. Most people won't meet up, at the grocery store to trade whatever, right? So the amount of effort that was put in is crazy, and I hope that people understand that how much work that you guys put into this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've always been a good communicator. I'm very good at keeping up with people and how to do things properly. And of course, with all the zoo experience, I knew how to do all the permits. And I had lots of opportunity to have letters of recommendation, and I was, like I say, often dealing with reptile curators in Europe and then private breeders. The Germans have always had a strong reptile society in Germany. If you're a member, you're encouraged to do things more than just keep them, to actually write um, scientific papers about things that you're conducting at home and stuff like that. So they're quite sophisticated. And this started about 1980, 82, a year before I resigned from the Fresno Zoo. I went over and met Bert Langewerf in the Netherlands, and became dear friends with him and many trips. And of course, Bert passed away some years ago, but I'm still in contact with his wife and kids, and one of which has sadly passed away as well.
Mm.
And so I just good at networking, kind of thinking. I'm a risk taker, I go off to Cameroon and do fish culture, and then off to Madagascar for a whole month in the field when they finally were letting in the Western country type citizens and stuff, and off to Japan and different things in Hong Kong, and it's just we're just back from 4.5 years living in Costa Rica, and it was time to come back to kind of civilization in a way, and it was good for my wife to be back to better medical situations. So, always been someone that's thinking about my dreams, making them happen, and I tell people, don't quit your day job. Everybody, I call it the you know this mathematics slash father-in-law scenario. It's Thanksgiving or Christmas. You've married this guy's daughter. Everybody's together, and you've got, you're making a few $100s or a couple thousand a month breeding whatever you're breeding, and you do the math. That's the math part. Okay, if I'm getting $2,000 a month with this many colubrids, blah blah blah, does the math, it's talking it all up. The father-in-law invests, and things don't work out, and then they've quit their day job or whatever, and it's not easy. I always took the approach, since 1983 I've been on my own, self-sufficient, to have treat it like a business, but as far as the approaches, but keep one's integrity and good service foremost, and the quality animals. Be totally transparent with customers, and it was always a three-prong approach where I would do leopard geckos, horned frogs, and pixie frogs were the trident for a certain period of time. And then when people started competing with me in the late 80s on the frog breeding, then about that time, Madagascar was opening up to the West and not so socialist and so forth. And I flew there and, got CITES permits and spent a month in the field, all organized, and brought the first chameleons back to Western Hemisphere in decades, and I had contact. The zoos were all fussing, who's going to go to Madagascar and represent, and they just keep having meetings and the bureaucracy of the zoo associations. And so I just called up my former colleagues, and I called up, San Diego Zoo, and I said, hey, do you want some Parsons chameleons from Madagascar? And Jim Bacon had sadly passed away by then, and um, Tom Schultz was curator, and he said, "Yeah, I sure do, but everything always dies from chameleons coming in." I said, "Yeah, but I got a idea why, and I will guarantee the animals for 6 months." And he says, "Tremper, you're crazy." I said, "No, I'm going to take the you know two anti-parasite drugs, Panicure and Flagyl stuff to with me. I'm going to treat the animals the day I catch them, because I believe that stress is what killing all these imported, flapneck chameleons and Jackson's chameleons were about all that was coming back in that period of time to the States. And so anyway, I parlayed all the money we had, and literally all of it, and arranged for tickets. It was 37 hours getting to the capital, and from Fresno, and spent a month in the field, and brought back all these Parsons chameleons, and had made a deal with David Groh at the Oklahoma City Zoo to take the Australats. He wanted those, and Gary Ferguson up at the university there in Texas, Christian University, wanted work on the Panthers and so forth. So made all these deals, and brought everything back. Nobody lost a single animal. Uh, no, and it all worked like clockwork. It was just like a lot of experience having lived in Africa and being self-sufficient with the fish culture thing. There's nobody there just to hold your hand in the Peace Corps,
Yes,
and
sir.
I knew how to function in third world country, and so I took my big styrofoam with the cardboard outer animal boxes full of blue jeans, ink pens, candies, T-shirts, different things I could trade for help in the field. And you know, I went to the dairy and got all these half-gallon milk cartons that are flat before they form them up, and you know put milk in them, and they're wax lined. And I took a pistol grip stapler, and so I had all these flat there. They didn't take up any room. And as the Levi's and T-shirts and Bic lighters and things disappeared out of my box, I was forming up uh, these milk cartons and putting panther chameleons in them, and where you could wash them out and stack them easily, and found that I didn't need to collect any of these chameleons until like the last day of the trip, or when we were leaving a certain area. I would hire a taxi driver to drive me around at night, do night driving, and that was exciting. Oh boy, I'm night driving, and now I'm you
Yeah.
know now I'm 32 years old, and you're finding Sanzinia and Madagascar ground boa babies and things on the road at night. And the interesting thing that chameleons do, it's a survivalship thing. They go out and go to sleep on the very tip of a limb, so that any jiggling or anything of a snake coming or a predator, they just fall.
Mm.
So when you're driving along the road, and like the island of Nose Bay at night, hanging over the road, like a Christmas ornament, is a green long limb like elephant grass, or almost looks like bamboo, and the end of it is a snow white sleeping panther chameleon or other
Wow.
species, and they're
Yeah.
literally hanging over the road because of their weight. So I would I would just put on a snake bag, a muslin snake bag, as a glove, and a taxi driver would pull up. I'd grab the chameleon, immediately let go the limb. I'd reverse the bag, tie a knot in it, put on the back seat, and keep going, and then fly out of the country the next day. Just go and know where all the animals are sleeping, and not stress them out by putting them in milk cartons, till the very end. So I'd medicate them, put them in the milk cartons, and came back to 37 hours. We didn't lose a single animal, and they all went out to other places, and it was a big hit, a big success for captive breeding in the States. And with a lot of these things, I brought back leaf-tailed geckos, the Europlatus fimbriatus, and a variety of other herps from Madagascar that weren't on CITES permits. So yeah, it could have been a big flop, but it worked out wonderfully, and propelled us into being able to leave Fresno. And because my dream, as you know, I'm a turtle and tortoise guy, and living in California with one species of native turtle, pretty boring. And it was always my dream, my bucket list, to have property where free ranging native water turtles occurred. And friends, Dave and Tracy Barker had moved out to the hill country there west of Bernie, Texas, and I was out to do some gray band hunting with Joe Forks. And on one trip, I teamed up with Gerald Merker, and we'd run into Bob Assetto and all those stories. But uh, just loved the whole environment out there on the way to the Barker's Breeding Center and past Cibolo Creek, and there was a little water crossing with a log and all kinds of turtle species sitting on it. And I said, "This is it, Joe. We're gonna come here. I'm gonna move everything from Fresno. We're gonna build here." And we got nailed a piece of property 3 months later on each side of Cibolo Creek, and it had 6 species of native water turtles in it, and I installed a high resolution Pelco zoom camera system over the creek, uh, and wired it all the way to the house where I could sit on the couch and with a joystick and zoom in and watch turtles at our water crossing and snakes and fill the whole screen with a crystal clear image, So I just always been blessed with people that believed in me, and so as things progressed, it was time to launch into some various other things with my three-prong attack to business. Still was doing the leopard geckos, you know, came up with the world's first albino, and you know, discovered a variety of different recessive genes that today are almost in every leopard gecko out there. But I just, had this breeding facility where it looked like a Roman numeral 3 from the air, and the vertical bars of the Roman numeral 3 were the indoor hallways. Uh, and it was a 9,000 square foot breeding center. And these hallways are about 80 something feet long. Uh, and each hallway opened to a similar size courtyard. But the hallway facing the courtyard had 16-foot wide standard double garage doors facing the courtyard that I could open and let the sunlight in on the chameleon cages or bearded dragons or whatever, baby spotted turtles, whatever I wanted. And and with all the predators out in the country, I needed these enclosed courtyards where and keep things from being attacked and eaten and injured by the native raccoons and ringtail cats and coach whips and so forth. So I designed another facility there in Bernie, Texas, and we moved everything there by 1994, and was there 25 years till it was time to downsize, and I wanted to leave that whole breeding center thing I developed when it was my own decision, not based on, finances or health or some other reason or last minute crisis. So it was just better to take control when it was under my own terms and, let the employees know that in 2 years we're going to downsize and sell out the animals and equipment and so forth. So moved to a smaller place, community called Fair Oaks Ranch, not too far from Bernie, Texas, between kind of halfway between Bernie and San Antonio, and took my best leopard gecko lines and my spotted turtle collection, breeding setup. I was producing close to 200 baby spotteds a year from
Wow.
captive bred animals I had grown up. Uh, One of my employees, Brad Chambers, hatched a bunch of babies, so I bought, like 20 or 30 babies from him and grew them up for 6 years and then start breeding my large numbers. So, yeah, you have to have a vision and determination and all, because a lot of these projects, the leopard gecko genetics and things like the spotteds I just talked about, they're multi-year tasks, and some of these leopard gecko genetic projects where it involve, 1,200 eggs and lots of space and just looking for that one mutation that you feel you've set everything up to get and then have that finally happen, so people would ask me, gosh, how do you do all this? What in the world, what's it about? And he says, well, actually I just do it for myself, and I call it living art. And if people like it, they can buy it, and if they don't, it's okay too. So but in any of the reptile stuff, most species across the board color cells. And you know hey, zoos can say, oh, we're not commercial, but they've got quite a gift shop, and lots of things going on to make their ends meet. And
Gotcha.
so I was always into captive breeding. I think the only wild caught animals I ever had were the founder stock from Madagascar, and I never bought from the dealers that were importing things and that kind of deal. Just self sufficient with it, and bred lots of the nose blue panther chameleons, the pardalis, and then people start competing with that. So I shifted gears again to writing the books, and and during the recession of 2008, followed the money to Asia, where there was a lot of interest and a lot of people wanting good things. So I started networking that and going to Hong Kong and uh, number of trips to Japan, debuted a new genetic combo morph called the Galaxy there. They had rented a whole nightclub and sold tickets. Oh my gosh! It was like crazy. They had this whole trip, whole group of doctor and veterinarian and school teachers and all, and they were putting this on, and they had all done custom T-shirts, and they were called the Tremper Pirates, and uh, and there was standing room only, and so kind of told my life story and made jokes, and a good dear friend of mine, who I named Hollywood because he was so flamboyant years ago. I met him 15 years ago, and out of all that, it was a great success. And I said, geez, Hollywood, what if no one bought tickets? You were really risking losing face, weren't you? And the whole herp community in Japan. And he goes, yes, daddy. Yes, daddy. He always, still to this day, calls me daddy. So I offered to write an article, the leading herp magazine. It's called The Vivarium, and it comes out every Vivarium Guide. It comes out every 3 months quarterly in Japan. And so I did a thing called Tremper Insider for 60 articles, and then stopped doing that after a while, kind of ran out of subject matter, but kind of kept them updated, the Japanese community, on what's going on in Europe, the United States, herp wise, what I'm doing, different tips, we called it Tremper tips, and on, what to watch for and gut loading insects and, just everything. But yeah, as a kid, when, things died, I mean, no, even the zoos didn't know how to keep anything alive,
Yes, sir.
and so I'd cut them open. I'd see what's going on inside, and I learned a lot. And I've done all my own veterinary work: cesareans, tail amputations, shots, eye work, everything myself, and taught veterinarians wherever I was located at the time how to deal with their patients that were arriving, tortoises with, runny nose, or gecko's got gangrene in its tail and different things. So, yeah, it's it's really treated me well, and I just had and still do have a wonderful herp life. I started this little project with a dear friend in California back in '86 with the cherry head redfoots when about 300 came into LA, all the same size and all about 5 inches long with the exact same shell configuration, very smooth, but growth rings at that size. And everyone thought they were dwarfs, but they actually get, over 10 or 12 inches. So I started breeding them, and we're on third generation on those. And it's the only thing I kept when we moved to Costa Rica in early 2020. Um, a good friend, Pete Mimikos, maybe you've run into him, outside of Bernie there. He kept them for me as a favor. And so I got them back here, and we've been back a little over a year from Costa Rica, not moving again.
Yes, sir.
And so just have the cherry head redfoots, and then we're doing our books. My wife Helen and I did one on morphs, and did 3 books in 2019. Had my one on leopard geckos, the next generations, printed in Japanese, and worked with them. My folks over there that I had been doing the article for, and they also do book publishing. And then we had a reprint of another book that was just doing really well, and then the Morphs book came out late 2019, and it was plus selling all the animals and moving to Costa Rica. So it was quite a endeavor, but we we're very happy here in Texas, and I keep up with everybody. I'm doing things with Reptilandia up there in Johnson City with Quetzal Dwyer and his wife. They're a great power couple, and knew him from you know many years, and he had a reptile public facility, Reptilandia in Costa Rica, that he sold.
Yes,
And
sir.
we knew him. He married a nice, wonderful Tikal wife who's very close friends with my wife. So yeah, we're still active, still shipping the books, selling them, and little Patreon site, and but doing some consulting and all. But yeah, I always tell people, don't quit your day job. They the herps don't know when it's Christmas. They don't know when you're sick, and when you've got employees that are taking time off, and you still have to deal with the stuff. But there's ways to balance it, and then shipping's gotten so expensive. It's getting harder, and it draws more people to the expos, I believe. Well, lots going on with the herp industry, and it's neat to see all the new faces and new people doing great work, and they'll carry the torch very nicely. There's so many my generation that have pioneered things with colubrid snakes and tortoise species and different lizards and so forth, and some of them still breeding their items today. But yeah, I'm not going anywhere. I tired of moving, so got a good place here.
Yes, sir. Well, and that's, being mindful of your time here with me this morning, that, one thing I'd be amiss not to point out and then thank you for is that the decisions you made, the work you put on to make, to bring some of these species into the North American hobby, there are thousands of people, it's an understatement, that now either have careers off of the decisions you made when you were younger and had the vision and put the effort in to bring those animals here. And I mean, just large corporations, livings, just the joy of reptiles. How many kids' first pet is a pet bearded dragon or a pet leopard gecko, and how much you played a part in that you completely altered the reptile hobby with the decisions you made. So, from what I'm doing in my life now, that, I think you're one of the people that are directly to thank for that, the work you put in. And that is amazing. And thank you again so much for your time today.
Well, that's wonderful, Lewis. Thanks for those great words. I appreciate it, and we're all in this together. That's the way to go forward. And I appreciate you hosting me today. And anytime you want to get back on some certain subject, I'd be happy to get with you again.
Well,
Appreciate it.
excellent. I appreciate it. Thank you. I look forward to chat with you in the future. I'll catch you later.
You bet.
Let me zoom out on you here. Okay, you got a message for the time capsule?
Yeah, and it's simply this. My prediction for you is that even though you'll forget all about this in some way consciously, next summer at about this time, you'll remember to return.